Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all in this webinar on a very important topic, that is practical and legal issues in the first appeal before Commission of Income Tax Appeal. We have got Dr. Agarwal, Dr. Rakesh Gupta, and CA Somil Agarwal with us. I would now request Dr. Rakesh Gupta to introduce Dr. Agarwal and CA Somil.
Thank
Over
you,
to you.
Saksham. Uh, Today, we are meeting with our audience after a long time uh, by way of this webinar. We are fortunate to have our senior partner, Dr. Raj Agrawal and CA Somil Agrawal. Dr. Raj and I are the partners. Apart from doing the studies together, we have authored 3 books which have been published by Taxmen. One is on search and seizure and assessment of such cases. The second one is real estate development joint development agreements, their tax implications, and of course the accounting aspects involved in this joint development agreements. And third one is the black money law, a treatise. So today I have especially requested Raj sir to kindly be with us at least for some time to initiate the discussion. Then we have got Somil Agrawal, who is neck deep into litigations with me, and he will also be spending some time today with us because he is going abroad and he has to catch flight. So I have requested him to spend some time with us. So now the topic is that of practical and legal issues in first appeal. Now I would request my partner Dr. Raj Agrawal to initiate the discussion, and then I'll start asking questions from Somil.
Thank you, Dr. Rakesh. Good evening, dear friends, dear audience. It is my privilege, and I am really honored and humbled by the gesture that I have been asked to deliver keynote address on this very important seminar, which is being addressed by Dr. Rakesh Gupta. I always feel that in professional services which we have in a as a professional in a CF firm or an advocate firm doing the tax and other laws, litigation of income tax is a specialized subject, is a specialized skill, and the person who are deeply involved or intensely involved in litigation job, they don't get time at all to devote for other kind of areas which are also served or which are also tackled or handled in the professional firm. Litigation, in the case of litigation, you have to devote a lot of time in courts, particularly in tribunal, high court, supreme court. Then updation with the knowledge and with the latest case laws, that requires a lot of time to be devoted. And presentation of the case in the court throughout the day, it's out. Then in the morning and evening, you are required to discuss, preparing the brief, discussing with the client, then giving the dictation. I mean, if a person is intensely involved in litigation, hardly gets the time for the other jobs. And from that point of view, the association, the combination of professionals, one who can look after the litigation or other part, another who can look after the planning strategy or the initial part of the, I mean, maybe even assessment and audits or some other areas, it makes a good combination. And from that point of view, I will say that I'm fortunate, or rather, we have a good collaboration or combination when right from the right from the start of our practice since 1984. Dr. Rakesh and myself are together now. Somil has also joined in litigation with Dr. Rakesh. And The second point which is there, that in the case of litigation, particularly tax litigation, there are points which may relate to facts of the case, and there are so many legal points on which you dwell upon and you make out the case. And in the case of tax litigation, I have seen a number of cases that sometimes it may not be very strong arguments may not be there for the purpose to argue on the facts of the case. But so far as the legality is concerned, on legal aspects, I mean, law has prescribed a particular procedure, and particularly in penal provisions of the Income Tax Act, the courts have said that penal provisions have to be interpreted very strictly as per the law provided. And if there is any lapse on the part of the officer or the tax authorities in imposition of penalty without following the proper procedure or proper provisions of the acts which are prescribed, then there may not be sustainability of such orders. So Dr. Rakesh is my partner, not for that reason. Otherwise, I am just saying that the acumenship which he has possessed for this purpose, that how to look at the case from factual point of view, of course, since he is chartered accountant also, and now being the lawyer also, I mean, from the point of view that what are the nitty-gritties of where the lapse has been there, where there is any lapse on count of the legal provision which have not been followed, and for that reason we can make out a case, or we can give the arguments that order may not be sustainable. So from that point of view, again, I am saying this today's webinar is very important, because as I have seen the posers which he has flashed, and the kind of posers are there are so many nitty-gritties involved in the case of litigation, maybe before the CIT appeal or even in higher forums. Then one has to be very vigilant, and one should be, because he always says, I have seen that whenever some CA or some client comes with the brief, always says that give me full file, right from the first notice till the order, all correspondence, all what they have asked, what you have replied, which on which date. I mean, whether dates have been asserted or not, whether notices have been issued in time or not. There can be so many aspects which have to be looked into, and what satisfaction has been recorded. Then if file is required to be inspected at the office of the assessing officer, then file is to be inspected to look into that what kind of mind has been applied by the assessing officer. So when there is a weak case on facts, I have seen him winning the cases on application of the law with such a minuteness that there is some lapse which has been committed, that is to be looked into. And particularly now, when there is going to be faceless regime, particularly at first stage of CIT appeal, it is already in vogue. It has already been put in place, and maybe later on for the higher forms also. Then there is a lot of significance of making effective representation. If we are making effective representation, even at the assessing officer level, even at the or at the appellate level with the CIT appeals, then there are good chances of winnability of the case. So therefore, relying upon any other thing, now one has to rely upon very effective representation, and therefore the points which are going to be discussed in this webinar, various posers which have been flashed for this webinar, becomes of great importance and significance. There has to be taken a decision sometimes, that at what forum, in what manner, and at what point of time certain issue is to be raised, certain plea has to be advanced, whether we have to go for writ or not to go for writ, depending upon the nature of the case, or depending upon the nature of the court, the trend of the court which is going on. That also becomes a decision to be taken importantly. And court craft in litigation for the advocates or those who are appearing regularly in the courts, court craft is also a very significant part. that they read the mood of the court, of the benches, of the judges, and accordingly the arguments are advanced, which can ensure winnability for you. I mean, all these things, I'm sure that now, I mean, we are going to discuss in this webinar, and in future also we will keep on interacting. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Raj. Now, friends, March is over. You must be having lots of assessment orders, CIT appeal orders, penalty orders, and must be in the midst of preparation of the first appeal. Therefore, we thought that we must share our experience with our fellow professionals, and then point out, I mean, certain things which need to be emphasized. So, with that thing in the mind, now we have decided to hold this webinar. So, uh, even before the assessment orders are passed, intimations are issued. Intimations, when I say intimations, I mean intimations under section 143, subsection 1. And adjustments are made, the disalliances are made, claims are denied. And at that stage, there are several issues which come up. So I would request Somil to deal, because he has to rush to the airport also. So quickly in 5-10 minutes, then I am there. I have not to go anywhere. So Somil would deal as to how should one tackle the adjustment made under section 143(1). Many times I have seen that we professionals tend to rely more on rectifications. Many times I have seen that we do not see even the portals. And when the final assessment order under section 143 is received, and when we find that there is no addition in that assessment order, but when it comes to the demand part, then we find there is a substantial amount of tax demand. Then we try to explore as to how is it possible that on the one hand there is no addition in the assessment order, but on the other hand there is tax demand of substantial amount. So Somil, now I would request you to deal with the disalliances or the adjustments which are made in the intimation under section 143 subsection 1.
Thank you, sir. My gurus, Raj sir, Rakesh sir, dear Saksham. As pointed out by sir, one of the very important issues, and I would say one of the burning issues right now, which we day and day encounter, is this intimation adjustments which are made under 143(1). One situation is where adjustment has been made, 143(1) order has been passed, which has come to the knowledge of the SSC, and now what remedy, what action one should take. As observed by sir, majority cases, a tendency is to file only rectification application. Yes, that is one of the remedies, but that should not be the only remedy, is what the point we would like to derive. The second situation, which is more of concern, is that number of times we have seen the assessees are not aware of 143(1) intimation orders. So the first point which I want to highlight here is, as a pointer I would give is, please make sure in this faceless regime, in this arena of e-communication, the email IDs, the numbers for SMS must be updated, must be proper on the income tax portal. Because whatever communication is uploaded on the portal as on date, SMS are sent to the mobile numbers registered on the portal, as well as emails are also sent. So that is one important aspect. Number of times we have seen the old numbers, old email IDs, and even for professionals also, my dear professionals also. In the past also, we have been giving our own IDs for the clients continuously. I would suggest a person responsible from the end of the client for proper monitoring of the emails, for proper monitoring of the portal, that should be there on the portal. So for proper communication, for proper information, we should ensure that proper communication, proper details are put in on the portal. Now, the second situation which I was talking about, that orders are passed, we are not aware of it. I remember a case which came up before us. Now, in that case, there was 143(1) intimation passed. Assessee wasn't aware about it. Subsequently, assessment proceedings began and assessment order was passed accepting the returned income of the assessee. After all question and answers, questionnaires and replies by the assessee. Now, when the assessment order came along with that computation, now a huge demand came. And when examining why this demand was there, the portal was checked and the 143(1) order was found. And you won't believe, adjustment of about 23 odd crores was made. And majority substantial adjustment was on this account that in the return form, we have exempt incomes, we have some deductions which are to be claimed. Some situations we have seen in the return form, amount credited to P&L in next column, where we exclude some amount from the profit and loss account, the figures are put in there. Now what happens is those figures which are put in as exclusion from P&L account in the return form, the software, the CPC tallies it with the exempt income schedule. And some deductions which are put in, some income which are not to be taxed are put in there. However, they are not properly exempt income. And due to that mismatch, adjustment comes. 143(1) order is passed, that adjustment is made. Similarly, in that case, contingent liability issue. Now, the tax audit report, earlier clause 21G, the main head clause 21 was amount debited to the P&L account, and clause A to G were covered, which had contingent liability also in it. In the latest form, that main heading amount debited to P&L is only for capital expenditure, profit and loss, personal expenditure, but not for the other clauses. And G comes at the end. So there is a kind of a debatable situation, or one can say, while reporting by the tax auditor, even if the contingent liability is reported only in the notes accounts, it is not debited in the P&L account. Still, it is reported in the tax audit report since it is not linked with whether it is debited to P&L account or not. Number of cases were received by us in which this adjustment has been prominent. And in this example which I was taking, major adjustment was made despite the amount was there in the notes to accounts. Assessment happened, return income was accepted. However, in 143(1) this adjustment was made. So, against the 143(1) adjustments, such kind of orders, yes, rectification is one of the remedy. We should file it. But as per our experience, and it has been seen in the past also, that application remains pending for years and years together. There is no disposal of that application. So, in our view, we must file appeal against the 143(1) intimation order. It is covered under section 246 capital A, where appealable orders has been defined. There is no dispute on that. And one can easily file appeal against the 143(1) order. And my dear friends, filing of appeal is a right given by the statute. And it has to be exercised in the manner in which statute has given the requirements. And one of the requirements is that the appeal should be filed within 30 days of receipt of the order, demand notice. So, the appeal, since it is a time-bound work, therefore, to protect the interest of the assessee, to ensure that we are not left remediless, or we are left with a narrow remedy, which is the 154 application, we should file appeal against the 143(1) intimation order, so that all our arguments can be argued and dealt with in the appeal. The second aspect, why we say that 143(1) appeal should be filed along with 154 application, is this, that in the 154 application, now that provision says mistakes apparent from record, which can be rectified under section 154. So the scope of 154 proceedings is only restricted or limited to the extent of mistakes which are apparent from record. Once we say we file 154 application, AO disposes it, and then we think of filing appeal against that 154 order, then that argument, then that defense that we have will be in a very narrow compass. Whether the error which was pointed out and the action of AO not doing it, whether it was a mistake apparent from record, and if it was, why the AO did not do it, it would be in a very narrow compass. Vis-a-vis, once we file appeal, all arguments, all facets, we can argue against the adjustment, disallowances made in the 143.1 order. Third aspect, sir, that filing of appeal is nowhere a hurdle, a or one cannot be heard saying कि साहब आपने appeal file कर ली है, अब आप rectification application नहीं file कर सकते. These are two alternate remedies. So both can be exercised. Yes, if in 154 the AO accepts your grievance, he rectifies the order, you can very well withdraw the appeal. So we must file appeal against the 143.1 order to ensure that all our arguments, all facets, all our armory should be available to fight our case to a tooth and nail. Only one caution, which I feel while taking this calculation, while taking this call whether we should file appeal or not, though I would say it is not very substantial in respect of 143.1 adjustments, but more in respect of 143.3 cases where return income has been accepted. Still, there are some minor issues. We think whether we should file appeal or not. Is that the only caveat is that once you set the ball of litigation rolling, then you cannot stop it. Yes, you can file an application to the CIT appeal to withdraw the appeal, but it is the CIT appeal who will pass an order, obviously a judicial order, whether the appeal is to be allowed to be withdrawn or not. So that only one caution, that once the litigation ball is rolling, withdrawal of appeal is not a right. It is not a unilateral act. Yes, you can take the leave of the court, and CIT appeal may allow to withdraw the appeal. So that is the only call that one has to take. And as I said, in respect of 143.1 cases, where the adjustment is on the basis of return form apparent, this risk is more or less not there. And therefore, for this reason also, filing of appeal against 143.1 orders is preferable, irrespective of the fact whether 154 is being filed or not. Obviously, if it is apparent from record, one should file it. And both remedies, especially the appeal remedy being a time-bound task, must be taken as per the statutory provisions. With this, to my mind, in respect of 143.1 issue, sir, 4 or 5 facets which I had in mind, I have brought them before my dear friends. Sir, any input you would like to add on that?
No, you have covered it very nicely. But anyway, I'll touch upon the other facets also. But since you are in hurry, you can leave, and wish you all the best for a pleasant journey. Okay.
Thank you, sir, and thank you everyone for the patient hearing. I'll take your leave, sir. Thank you.
Yes. Now coming back to this 143.1 and rectification, as Somil has said, that by filing appeal, I mean, you are not going to lose in any manner. But by not filing appeal and solely relying upon the rectifications petition, it may become very dangerous. Rectification petition may not be disposed. There is no fiction as it used to be once upon a time, that if the rectification petition is not disposed within a particular time frame, it will be deemed to be allowed. So there is no such fiction as of now. So in that situation, rectification petition is not disposed. The demand keeps on hovering over your head. So where to go? So therefore, I always say that if you have got more than one options and weapons in your armory, then you must fire your salvos on all counts on all fronts. The next subset of this question, which was framed by me, was that what is the choice between an appeal or revision under section 264? Many times I have seen my professional friends going in for revision under section 264 instead of filing appeal. For filing appeal, there is a time limit of 30 days from the date of the receipt of the order. Whereas for filing revision petition, it is 1 year from the date of the concerned order against which revision petition is to be filed. But I can tell you, based upon my experience, that the appellate remedy is a much more effective and efficacious remedy as compared to the revision remedy. Now, in revision remedy, though commissioner PCIT has to pass a judicious order, he has not to pass any arbitrary order for that matter, but some element of arbitrariness cannot be ruled out. Though that cannot be ruled out in case of even CIT appeal also. But in case of CIT appeal, deciding against you or exercising his discretion in an arbitrary manner, you have got immediate relief in the form of appeal before the income tax appellate tribunal. Whereas if the PCIT, while exercising the revisionary jurisdiction under section 264, now passes an order adverse against you, the only remedy which is available to you is approaching the High Court by way of a writ. So, this different remedies by way of different forums to seek redressal of your grievance is the consideration which must be borne in mind while choosing whether one should go in for appeal or whether one should go in for revision under section 264. So, this has to be borne in mind. Now, that takes us to another question which I raised, and that question number 4 I will pick up first, that which salient points one should remember while filing appeal. Now, when I put this question, the one thing which was uppermost in my mind, I am quite conscious that we are speaking before the audience which is well reasoned professionals, well experienced professionals. So I am not going to discuss as to which is the form in which the appeal is to be filed, or appeal is to be filed within 30 days. Everybody knows it. What is the salient point when I framed this question was uppermost in my mind was that tax on the return income must stand paid. Many of us may not be aware about this mandatory requirement of section 249 subsection 4. Now section 249 subsection 4 says that if you have filed the return of income, assessment having been made, you want to challenge that assessment, then the tax on the returned income, kindly mind, again I'll see, because I have seen, if not many, but then good number of cases having been lost on the ground that this condition has been ignored while filing appeal. The tax on the returned income must stand paid. If tax on the returned income is not paid, then appeal is not maintainable. First appeal is not maintainable. Therefore, and if the return has not been filed, then section 249 subsection 4 small b says that the amount of advance tax which was required to be paid, that must be paid. Now, insofar as the first situation where you have filed return, then tax must be paid on the returned income absolutely. No relaxation, no power to commissioner appeal to relax the rigor of this requirement. Whereas if you have not filed the return, you are required to pay advance tax amount equal to the amount of advance tax. In that case, the commissioner has been given discretion to waive or relax the requirement of paying that much of tax before filing appeal. So, tax must stand paid. Now, the question comes, now what is the meaning of tax? Whether it is the tax or whether this tax is inclusive of interest. Because while filing return, if you have paid taxes which fall short, now since there is a, now the returns are filed online, so there is no question of any shortfall in terms of interest. But then it used to be, a source of litigation at some point of time, whether the tax would include interest also for the purpose of section 249(4). One view used to be that first of all, the shortfall will be appropriated towards interest. And once that is appropriated towards interest, the tax on the return income falls short. But fortunately, decisions came from the courts in which they said that tax means the bare tax. And therefore, so this is that point which I wanted to highlight. Then another point which I have seen many times our professional friends faltering is that if there is a combined order for several years or combined order under different sections, like suppose there is a default for not deducting the tax under section 194C, order under section 201 is passed, there is another default of not paying tax, not paying TDS under section 194I. So if a combined order has been passed or involving different years, different financial years or different assessment years, then you must ensure, and this is a salient point which was in my mind, that you must file separate appeal qua different year and qua each order with reference to which the financial penalty has been imposed. So this is another point which I would like to uh, emphasize, because I have seen number of times when the courts say, okay, you have filed one appeal, now you ought to have filed this much number of appeals, now choose one or choose which appeal would you like to, which one of the several appeals would you like to pursue. So this aspect. Then signing of appeal, I have seen that if there is a managing director, then also I have seen appeals filed by the companies are signed by the directors. When there are statutory bodies and corporations, then the authorized signatory must be approved by the board, and that approval, that power of attorney, the authority, now that must accompany the appeal. When we used to file paper appeal, it used to accompany, but then what is required, that it must be readily available. So these things must be borne in mind. Now this takes us to another very interesting issues, and that issue is whether, question number 2, whether appeal can be filed against any adverse order passed against an SSE. Now, because what is the genesis of this question? The genesis of this question is a somewhat belief entertained by all of us that since there is a appellate mechanism provided under the Income Tax Act, and that appellate mechanism is some sort of relief which is sought to be extended to the taxpayers, therefore whenever any adverse order is passed against an SSE, then appeal must be there. So this kind of a belief now is not founded on the correct understanding of law. Now what is law? The law is that a right of appeal is a statutory right. It is not an inherent right. So this right to file an appeal is there so long as the statute recognizes it. So it is not the law that whenever, wherever any adverse order is passed, you can straightway file appeal. It's not like this. So which adverse orders are appealable? You will have to see the relevant section. And under the Income Tax Act, for first appeal, the section is 246A, and now from 1/4/2023, section 246 also, where the Joint Commissioners appeal has come to be created. So let us read those sections 246 and 246A, and then should find whether this order which is adverse to you, now whether is prescribed as an appealable order. If it is prescribed an appealable order, appeal only then can be filed only then. Therefore, it is not any or every adverse order against which appellate mechanism is provided. So let us shed our preconceived notions that whenever an assessing officer or tax authorities would pass an adverse order, there would invariably be appeal is not the correct understanding of law. But then associated with this is question. Like, first of all, let me clarify with the example. Suppose your return is treated as defective. Returns are treated as defective under section 139 subsection 9. An order is passed. The question comes that there cannot be a more adverse order than this kind of an order. But then, surprisingly, there is no appeal prescribed against such kind of an order. You apply to a TDS officer for a lower deduction of tax at source. He does not allow you, or he allows you partially. This is an adverse order. But then there is no appeal prescribed against such kind of an order. You cannot file appeal against such kind of an order. So there are several, like in case of the stay petitions you file, he passes an order on your stay petition rejecting your stay, request of stay. Now, this is an adverse order, but then there is no appeal prescribed against such kind of an order under section 246 capital A. Therefore, it is not appealable order, and therefore, even if it is an adverse order, you cannot file appeal. Now, having said so, the associated question which comes now, whether a person against whom an adverse order is passed in certain situations where the appeals have not been prescribed, whether would become remediless. Now, answer to this question is not there under the Income Tax Act. Now, answer to this question is there under our constitution. When there is no remedy, then the remedy lies by way of a writ. So, if an order is passed which is an adverse, against which there is no writ remedy, where there is no appeal remedy provided under the Income Tax Act, then you can either file a revision petition under section 264, or you can approach the High Court in terms of Article 226 and 227 of the Constitution. So, at the end of the day, an order either would be appealable, and if it is not appealable, then you can file a writ. The writ may be a writ of certiorari, a writ seeking mandamus. I mean, there are 5 or 6 kind of writs, so that can be issued by the High Court, and writ of prohibition, writ of quo warranto. So, but and under the income tax, under the Income Tax Act, the maximum writs are writs of certiorari or writs of mandamus, and writs of prohibition also. So, uh, so a person may not be effectively remediless, but the nature of remedy is different, having regard to whether that adverse order is appealable or adverse order is not appealable. The next is interesting issue, and that is question number 3. So we are known not speaking in that conventional manner. Now we raise certain issues because our audience, our fellow professionals, chartered accountant friends and advocates friends, tax professional friends, they are equally experienced, equally knowledgeable. Therefore, there is no point in speaking on preliminary issues. Therefore, we try to touch upon those facets, which are of non-conventional nature and character. So, question number three: in which kind of cases you acquire the right to file an appeal even if adverse order is not passed against you? Now, if you read section 246A, now it says that you must be a person aggrieved. Then somebody can say that if an adverse order has not been passed against you, now where is the question and occasion for you to feel aggrieved? And since you cannot be said to be aggrieved, therefore your right to file appeal does not active. Like I give an example. Now, when there used to be the faithful assessment, now additions at times used to be agreed upon. Now, when additions used to be agreed upon, then obviously, qua that agreed addition, you could not be said to be aggrieved, unless, of course, you claim that agreement is a farce. That agreement has been obtained by the assessing officer by exercising undue influence, by exerting pressure or coercion, or by misrepresenting. Therefore, you have to be a person aggrieved. But when an order has not been passed against you, much less an adverse order has been passed against you, now can you still be said to be aggrieved? That is the question which I am trying to. And when I'll speak further, you'll come to know, yes, I remember that the director of a closely held company who had resigned and gone may be saddled with liability in respect of the tax, interest, and penalty which is due from that closely held company. Because there is section 179 which says that if you have been a director of a closely held company, maybe for a day in the previous year, and that previous year for which the tax demand, interest demand, or penalty demand has been raised and which cannot be recovered from that company, then each person who has been director at any time during that previous year may step into the shoes of the defaulting company. It's very dangerous section. So this director, who was director say for a few days in a closely held company, had gone back after resigning. This closely held company was saddled with a huge tax liability, which this company has not appealed. Now this director, when he comes to know that the demand has been raised in case of a closely held company, and that demand which can devolve on him when assessing officer would pass an order under section 179, but nonetheless the demand has been raised against that company of which he was the director, and he can be the potential defaulter under section 179. Therefore, he can, though adverse order has not been passed against him, but then he can still be called a person aggrieved. I have seen, not only have I seen, but then I have contested such cases on behalf of such directors, once upon a time directors. And uh, because the very first question which was raised by the appellate authority was, what locus standi do you have to contest this appeal? Then it was submitted, sir, I am a person aggrieved because of this reason, because of this reason, because of this reason. And therefore, I have got the locus standi, and the courts accepted. So, it is not always necessary that an adverse order may not have been passed against you, but still you can be an aggrieved SSE, and being an aggrieved person or aggrieved SSE, you acquire the right to file an appeal. Now, next question. Now, which my fellow professional friends at times face, and not only do the professionals but then our clients also, the employees working with our client organizations also feel and ask. Now, a statement of facts which is required to be appended with form number 35. Now, whether we should file or we should not file, or if at all we file, then to what extent should we file? Now, so far as the legal obligation is concerned, the legal obligation as per income tax rules, because the forms are prescribed, form 35 has been prescribed under the rules, and that form contains a particular column, a statement of facts. Therefore, legal requirement and obligation is to give the statement of facts. But immediately the question comes that to what extent should the statement of facts, this is my personal opinion based upon my hardcore experience of 38 years, that is what I'm sharing. I'm not saying that what do I believe, I mean, is the only solution, but then, and I'll support my this experience with reasons. That statement of facts at this stage, in my humble view, should not be very comprehensive. The reason is that appeal has to be filed within a period of 30 days. You, as the counsel, may not have been associated with assessment. That client may have engaged you post assessment. You have got several clients for whom you have to file appeal. Period of 30 days may not be enough for you to grasp the factual nuances in respect of this appeal which you are going to file. Therefore, within this much of shortage of time, paucity of this important time factor, my humble advice always remains, and which I follow religiously, that it should not be very comprehensive. Because if by giving some facts at this stage, you commit yourself to a particular state of affairs, then that state of affairs which you admit as a statement of fact in your appeal memo, that will keep on staring at your face. I'm not saying that statement of fact given by you along with the appeal memo is final. No, I'm not saying it. But you having stated something as a statement of fact, and later on when you happen to read the entire case peacefully, then there may well be the necessity for you to present the facts in a different manner. Therefore, now at this stage, I always urge, emphasize that statement of facts at this stage, because when you will file the written submissions before CIT appeal, you have got plenty of time in peace. At that time, you can give any amount of facts in your written submissions, and then you can give those statement of facts at that time when you prepare written submissions, by taking stock of all the facts put together seen by you in a holistic manner. So this is the philosophy. Many times my clients say, "Sir, I mean, the statement of facts is too brief." Let it be. It is a conscious call. It is not an accidental call, it is a conscious call. But then those who do not want to understand and appreciate, let them not. But then this is the philosophy, this is the mindset, and of course, based upon my hardcore experience of 38 years in all the four possible situations which can be there. As a chartered accountant, I have practiced for 16 years. As an advocate, I have been practicing for 22 years now. As a member of the Income Tax Appellate Tribunal for 1 year almost. Then, as an SSC, also I have filed appeals. So, in all the possible four capacities, I can say, based upon my hardcore experience of 38 years, that statement of facts, till the time you are so sure about the facts and your case, you must be miser in giving the statement of facts. Yes. Now, question number 6. How should one approach to prepare grounds of appeal? It's very important. I always say the grounds of appeal are the soul and heart of an appeal. Therefore, the grounds of appeal have to be prepared very cautiously and indulgently. And again, I'll share my practical experience. So, grounds of appeal, first of all, should not be argumentative. They are required to be concise. But at the same time, your grievance must come broadly in those grounds. Suppose if an assessing officer has treated a particular expenditure under a particular head as capital expenses and has disallowed that expenditure to that extent, then your ground of appeal in that regard would be enough if you write that the assessing officer has erred in law and on fact in making disallowance or treating this much of amount as capital expenditure out of this expenses head. Now, why he has erred in law and on facts, that need not be incorporated in the ground, because if you incorporate that, that will mean that you are including the arguments and then thus defying the very principle of the grounds formation. So, grounds should be made in such a manner that it brings out your grievance, and at the same time they have not to be argumentative, they have to be concise. I have seen my many fellow chartered accountants and tax professionals now who put their entire sentiments and emotions in the grounds, and I always say on the lighter side that to express your sentiments and emotions, there may be better places than the grounds of appeal. Therefore, and if your grounds are so wide enough that it can cover a particular facet, another facet, third facet, fourth facet of that larger ground, that serves your purpose. Suppose if I have raised one ground that the assessing officer has assumed jurisdiction not in accordance with the law. Now you kindly see this ground is broadly worded, but it is non-argumentative, it is concise, and then you kindly see how many facets can be argued into it. Whether the assessing officer was having territorial jurisdiction over the SSE, whether the assessing officer was having valid legal jurisdiction over the SSE, whether so when you say that the assessing officer has assumed jurisdiction, then The jurisdictional notice say 143(2) having not been issued in time, have not been served in time, that is also embedded into it. A notice under section 153C, as it used to be, now 148 AD and 148, having not been served, even that is also legal jurisdiction having not been assumed in accordance with the law. And but then if somebody insists that, oh, you have not taken up this ground specifically regarding the territorial jurisdiction, there is no point. Why do you want to confine your attack with reference to a particular point when the law permits you to agitate it in a broad manner? When you will prepare written submissions, now you say that he assumed jurisdiction not in accordance with law for this reason, for this reason, for this reason, for this reason. So this has to be. Now, while drafting grounds of appeal, now the first thing, I'll share my practical experience. First, you deny the liability. Now, assessing officer, sorry, you say that the appellant denies its liability to be assessed. Now, you kindly see this ground is so small, concise, non-argumentative, but then how many things it possesses, and how many counts you can agitate. Now, if you deny yourself to be assessed, that means that you deny your liability to be assessed in a particular status. You deny your liability to be assessed at a particular amount. You deny your liability to be assessed for this year. You deny your liability to be assessed at a particular tax. You deny your liability to be assessed at a particular interest component. So that denial, and if you read section 246A1, you will find the denial of an assessee to be assessed in any order, I mean, is prescribed as an appealable order. So, first of all, you take this ground. Again, this is omnibus ground, all embracing ground, all encompassing ground. It's non-argumentative, it is concise. The second ground, which should always be raised, again, is my humble opinion. I'll keep on repeating it, but even if I do not say, then you kindly take it. This is my humble suggestion, humble IOA duty. I have taken it like this, and you must have, those who know me must have found also, that I owe a duty to my, at least the younger brothers and sisters from the profession, to share whatever little I have learnt based upon my experience. So today's webinar is a step in that direction only. So the one of the grounds should be that the assessing officer has erred in law and not facts in assuming jurisdiction. If an assessing officer has reopened your assessment, then the assessing officer has erred in reopening the assessment. I am making these grounds too miserly, but I hope that I am able to drive home my point, which I am trying to emphasize. If some reference has been made, reference has been made to the TPO, reference had been made to the district valuation officer, challenge that reference. Take the ground of non-observance of the principle of natural justice. And that, suppose if you say an assessing officer has erred in passing the assessment order without observing the principle of natural justice. Now you can challenge what? You can challenge that the material has been collected at the back of the SSE. You can argue that though the material was collected not only at the back of the SSE, it was not confronted. you can always argue in the light of this broad ground that cross examination was not allowed, though it was demanded by you. You can always argue that the assessment order on this point is non speaking. So you can argue various facets. So this is important. Now, associated with this, a question comes. Now, interest is always levied in most of the cases. Now, whether there can be appeal against the levy of interest. Supreme Court had an occasion to deal this. That normally there is no right of appeal against the levy of interest, unless, of course, the SSE denies the very leviability of interest. So, if an SSE says that interest is not leviable under section 234B, till that time his right of appeal is not there. Then comes the question. Now, if I want to agitate that instead of, say, for example, 10 lakhs of rupees of interest under section 234B, the interest could be levied only up to rupees 6 lakhs. So, can in such a situation, when I am not denying the very leviability of interest, what I am agitating, not 10 lakhs but 6 lakhs levy of interest. Now, whether appeal would lie in the light of the Supreme Court decision in the case of Central Manganese Ore 160 ITR 961, maintainability of appeal on this point looks to be difficult. But then you see, as an arguing counsel for these many years, now we tend to acquire, as Raji has said, the acumenship or articulative skill. Now, in such a situation, now can I not say that I am denying I am denying the very leviability of interest of rupees 4 lakhs. So, by saying so, now my right to file appeal against that interest, now that comes into existence. But then that is debatable. Similarly, I have seen in very many appeals we do write that assessing officer has erred in initiating penalty. Of course, initiation of penalty can be one of the grounds, but not when you file appeal against the quantum appeal. At this stage, raising ground on the initiation of penalty is a premature ground. Ground can certainly be there, but then that ground can be raised when you file appeal against the penalty order. Because many times, we argue in penalty appeal that the assessing officer has erred in initiating penalty. Because on so many counts, I need not, because again, I'll end up in dealing it for 15 minutes. So, while making grounds of appeal, now you must be non-argumentative, it should be concise, but at the same time the grievance must come out clearly. You may choose to make the broader ground under the umbrella of which you can raise several other subsets of issues. You deny the very assessment, you raise grounds of appeal relating to the assumption of jurisdiction, you challenge the making of reference by the assessing officer, you raise the ground of non-observance of the principle of natural justice, and I think these are the precautions one should take while approaching the preparation of grounds of appeal. Now, next question. What is the additional ground of appeal and when should it be filed and how should it be filed? Now, I would say before answering this question that ideally there should not be an occasion for you to file additional ground. But I'm not saying that additional ground cannot be filed. It can be filed. But your attempt when you draft the appeal, when you file appeal, your grounds of appeal, as I have just finished my discussion as to how it should be and what should be the approach. So your approach should be that your appeal memo, grounds of appeal, going along with appeal memo must be taking care of all your grievances. But in certain situations, moving of additional ground cannot be ruled out. Cannot be ruled out. Law keeps on evolving. I mean, some claim which may not have been made by you now becomes maintainable at later stage, and by that time you had already filed appeal in which there was no occasion for you to have moved additional ground and the ground of appeal. So additional ground of appeal, as the name suggests, is the ground which is in addition to the grounds of appeal taken by you in your appeal memo. But there are certain ground rules for moving the additional ground. The first appellate authority is not obliged always to admit your additional ground. You will have to seek his permission. And when I say permission, that is a judicial permission. Because to admit or not to admit additional ground, a ground which was not taken in appeal memo, is the discretion vested with the commissioner appeal. Discretion doesn't mean any arbitrary exercise of power. Now, somebody can say, but then should not be saying that since he has got discretion, therefore he may or may not admit the additional ground. That is his choice. No, his choice is there. But then reaching to that choice now is a judicial duty. It has to be fair. It has to be judicious. It has to be conscientious. It has to be reasonable. It has to be objective. It should not be arbitrary. It should not be whimsical. I can keep on adding the adjectives. So the bottom line is that it should be fairly decided whether SSC was prevented by sufficient cause in not taking this ground along with his appeal memo. If you read subsection 5 of section 250, the only limitation which is there with the first appellate authority is that he has to ensure that omission of this ground from the appeal memo was not willful and his prayer is not unreasonable. Meaning thereby, if I put it in simple words, that in case Commissioner Appeal finds that this ground of appeal could not be taken in the facts and circumstances of that case, and there may be X number of factors for that, depending upon the factual matrix, and therefore he should be permitted or he should not be permitted. So, additional ground of appeal, though can be moved by an SSE, but he will have to demonstrate his bona fide. He will have to demonstrate the circumstances because of which he could not rake it up in his appeal memo, and therefore, and when you move an additional ground, the commissioner appeal will have to pass an order, and that order will be challengeable before the tribunal. If it has been admitted, then it can be challenged by the revenue. If it has not been admitted, then it can be challenged by the SSE. So, Additional ground of appeal is a ground in addition to the original grounds of appeal, and it can be filed during the course of the appeal proceedings, but you'll have to show your bona fide that omission to include this ground from your appeal memo is not willful nor unreasonable. And then when you are required to file a petition for additional ground, you must make out your petition as to what is the additional ground which you want to raise, what prevented you from not including this ground from your appeal memo. That must come out clearly, because on your this petition the commissioner appeal will have to pass a speaking order justifying to justifying his admission or rejection of the admission of additional ground. What is paper book? Next question is, what is paper book and what are the ground rules for preparing and filing paper book? Can any evidence be filed in the paper book? Now, before I come to the paper book, first of all, let us understand the concept of importance of evidence. Whatever evidences, pleadings which we have filed before the assessing officer alone now can be made the part of paper book. Because if you read rule 46 capital A of the income tax rules, it contains a negative mandate to the appellate authority that no documentary or oral evidence shall be admitted by the appellate authority which was not filed or advanced by the assessee before the assessing officer, unless then four situations have been envisaged. So first of all, you take it as a general ground rule that only those evidences, documentary or oral, can be advanced, can be conveyed, can be presented before the first appellate authority which were filed by you before the assessing officer. Any evidence which was not so filed and which you want to file now will technically be called an additional evidence. And when you want some additional evidence which were not filed by you before the assessing officer, then there are certain ground rules. Ground rules are that you will have to show to the appellate authority that you produced this evidence, but assessing officer rejected this evidence or refused to admit this evidence. Not rejected, but refused to admit this evidence. Second, you were prevented by sufficient cause from producing this evidence at that time, though you were called upon by the assessing officer to produce it. Third is, though assessing officer did not call upon you to produce this evidence, but you were otherwise prevented from producing it before the assessing officer. And lastly, that an issue has been decided by the assessing officer without giving you adequate opportunity of being heard. So you will have to make out your case before the first appellate authority under any one or more of these four clauses of Rule 46A before you can call upon the first appellate authority to kindly admit this evidence which could not be filed because of this reason. In paper book, what is paper book? Paper book, you may say it in a crude form. Paper book means a smaller assessment file. Paper book means a book which contains those pleadings and evidences which were filed before the assessing officer and which would be required by the first appellate authority to adjudicate your issue, which would be required by you to impress upon the first appellate authority that it should be decided in your favor. So, out of the larger assessment file, when you compile a smaller book containing only those letters, those evidences which are relevant for the grounds of appeal, when you compile them in the form of a book, that is called the paper book. Ideally, this paper book should not contain any additional evidence. If there are additional evidence, then you must file a petition seeking the permission of the CIT appeal that here are these evidences, which are the additional evidences, and these evidences are relevant to this ground of appeal, to this ground of appeal, and why these evidences could not be produced before the assessing officer under any one or more of those four situations that you presented it to the assessing officer, he refused to admit, you were prevented by sufficient cause, or assessing officer decided this issue without hearing you. So paper book is very important piece or important book, because ultimately CIT appeal, though is expected, the first appellate authority is expected to summon the entire assessment record, but that much of assessment record which will be required by him for adjudication of your grounds of appeal, now this is your duty to bring it on record before the first appellate authority, so that after all you are the person who is claiming relief before him, therefore burden is on you to bring on record all those evidences which should be considered by the appellate authority to adjudicate it in your favor. So how should it be filed? It should be filed by way of a petition. Whether it is additional ground, whether it is additional evidence, because CIT appeal will have to adjudicate it by passing a speaking order as to why he admits the additional evidences or why he does not admit the additional. He will have to pass a speaking order. And not only he has to pass a speaking order, he cannot pass or he cannot admit unless the other party, that is the revenue, that is the assessing officer, is given adequate opportunity of being heard. So it should be filed by way of a petition. So this is very important. What is the next question is precautions while preparing written submissions. Ideal way to approach. Again, I mean, there cannot be any fixed or blanket approach to the preparation of the written submissions, written arguments. But based upon my experience, which I think, would be proper. And now the importance of written submissions and paper book and the linking of submissions and paper book very meticulously cannot be overemphasized in view of the faceless nature of the appellate proceedings. Because when you sit across the table, you can drive home your point in far lesser time. Sir, here is the argument. Here are the backup material for that argument. Kindly see this page. Because in faceless proceedings, there will be your submissions and there will be your paper book. Therefore, preparation of written submissions and its linking with the paper book pages in a very meticulous manner now has assumed all the more importance in view of the facelessness of these proceedings. So we were on the approach of the preparation of written submissions. So सबसे पहले your first para should grasp and capture the controversy. Saksham is working with me for quite some time. He knows it. Somil now has learnt it, and but then I always emphasize it that there should be a systematic way of preparation of the written submission, because I have seen many times, innumerable times, that my friends they jumble up. So first of all, your first para should capture as to what is the nature of addition, the amount of addition, so that the appellate authority, or for that matter any reader, should come to know by reading that para as to what is the controversy involved. The next para should be those findings of facts which are of course relevant to that ground of appeal, on which there is no difference of opinion between you and the assessing officer. You had said something, assessing officer also mentions the same thing in the assessment order, and this admitted fact, because that will be the launching pad further for you to make further arguments. So admitted facts, admitted by you, admitted by the assessing officer, and which has got bearing, which is relevant, which is germane to your ground of appeal, that should come. The third para should be those facts which have not been admitted by the assessing officer, or which is contested by the assessing officer, but you want those facts to be established for the purpose of advancing your claim, your ground of appeal. Now, therefore, that para must state the must state the facts which have not been admitted by assessing officer. Then, why do you want first appellate authority to admit those facts as facts? So, you will have to support those contested facts with the help of your paper book, pleadings, evidences which you furnished before the assessing officer. So now you have captured the ground, you have mentioned the admitted facts, now you have established facts in your favor with the help of evidences. Now next para should be that in the light of admitted facts and in the light of the facts which you have persuaded the appellate authority to admit, now what is the law on these facts? Discuss about the law. Then in support of this conclusion, what are the judicial decisions? Now you have proved your case positively. You have admitted facts, contested facts which you want appellate authority to admit, the, the law, the position of judicial decisions. Now you have proved your claim positively. Now last you should raise or take each adverse observation of the assessing officer and then meet it. I have seen my friends preparing written submissions in a jumbled manner. Sometimes they will mention one fact, other time they will come to the adverse observations made by the assessing officer, and in that process, the things get messed up. So this is my humble submission which I want to share with my friends is that though there is no hard and fast rule of preparing submissions, because it is something which falls within the domain of communication as to how should one communicate. The communication is effective if the person to whom that communication is addressed now understands it. So my entire endeavor of dealing the written submissions is as to how you prepare your written submissions so that the commissioner appeal, the other party, should understand, appreciate in a logical, in a cohesive, in a coherent manner. Question number 10. Precautions while preparing various kinds of petitions to be filed before CIT appeal. Now, first of all, what kind of petitions are normally filed before the CIT appeal in a case? I'm not saying that all these petitions will invariably require to be filed. What I'm saying that what can be. Suppose if an appeal has been filed late, you will have to file a condonation petition seeking the condonation of the delay. If you are seeking adjournment, you will have to file an adjournment petition. If you are seeking a stay of demand from the first appellate authority, you will have to file a stay of demand petition. If you are moving additional ground, you will have to file a petition for admission of additional ground. If you want additional evidences to be produced, then you would be required to file a petition for admission of additional evidences. So there can be even other kinds of petitions. I do not want to add it, I do not want to multiply it. So what I wish to emphasize, because these are the common types of petitions which may or may not be required in a given case, but these are the petitions which are normally filed before the first appellate authority. So whenever you have to file a petition, you must prepare a petition in writing, addressed to the principal commissioner, addressed to the commissioner of appeal, sorry. Bring out as to what do you want. If you want to move additional ground, now what is the additional ground? If you want to move additional evidence, which are the additional evidence? If you want adjournment application, so you want an adjournment, on what ground you want an adjournment. Then next part of your petitions must state as to why this thing which you seek admission from the CIT appeal should at all be accepted or admitted by him. So if it is an additional ground, then your request is not unreasonable or your omission is not willful, that must come. If it is additional evidence, then you must make out under one of those 4 clauses of Rule 46A. If an adjournment petition has been moved, then you must make out the ground, and that ground must be plausible ground. If you have moved a stay petition to CIT appeal, then what is the basis, justifiable basis for you to seek a stay from the first appellate authority? I always say that while preparing any petitions before the first appellate authority, or for that matter while preparing petition before any authority, your petition should be made in such a manner, then kindly mind this language which I am going to say. Your petition should be made in such a manner that if tomorrow you have to go to High Court on CIT appeal refusing your prayer, then this petition must be self-contained, self-sufficient. That must be, any factual thing which you say must be supported with evidence. That evidence may be documentary evidence, that evidence may be circumstantial evidence depending upon the nature of averment which you are making. So these are the precautions while preparing various kind of petitions to be filed before CIT appeal. And the last question, and then I will leave the floor for the questions, is that what is the risk if one files appeal? One can say in the lighter vein, the risk of you losing the appeal is the greatest risk. Yes, of course, that risk is there. Your appeal may not be accepted, may be accepted in part, but then the biggest risk, if at all that would be proper expression, is the power of enhancement which CIT appeal has got. Somil also mentioned that filing of appeal is in your hand, but then withdrawing of appeal, of course, is in your hand, but not exclusively in your hands. You will have to obtain permission from the CIT appeal to withdraw the appeal. He may or he may not grant. I have seen like petition filed before the settlement commission when there used to be settlement commission. I mean, once you file a settlement commission, a petition a settlement commission, then it was the settlement commission which would permit, only then you can withdraw it. So power of enhancement with the CIT appeal now is a risk. Once you have filed an appeal, his powers are coterminous with that of the assessing officer. He can do what assessing officer could have done, and he can enhance the assessment, he can enhance the penalty. So that kind of power is there. So friends, it is 1.5 hours. Now I would be pleased to give, I mean, first of all, let me say, one of my friends asked a question today in the morning, which was there on the YouTube, that he had filed an appeal against intimation under section 143(1) and has moved rectification petitions also before the assessing officer, CPC, but then there is no reply. Miglani साहब का ही था. So Miglani साहब, now if these authorities do not act despite a considerable period has elapsed, then the only recourse which you have got is to file a writ seeking a mandamus from the court to them to discharge their official obligations. I know that this suggestion is theoretical, but you have asked because CIT appeal institutions in this country has come to a complete grind halt, standstill. I do not know why that institution is not moving, apart from disposing some minor cases here and there. Since last 4 or 5 years, there are virtual no disposal of appeals, and there is no explanation coming from the board as to why CIT appeals are not disposing the appeals, except Finance Act 2023 by mentioning in the memorandum that we are creating the post of Joint Commissioner's Appeal because of large number of cases. But then why these cases have been allowed to MS? Why these cases have been allowed to pile up? I mean, nobody is giving any answers. That is a very unfortunate part. Yes. Next question. Anup sir, question chala gaya section. Draft assessment order is mandatory. Yes, draft assessment order is mandatory under 144B. Next. Order passed under section 147 on 30th 322 by National Face Assessment, but section 144B was amended to include 147. Before that section was not there. Whether order is valid. Now, these are called the procedural amendments. So, if after amendment an order is passed, then it has to comply with the conditions of the section as it was obtaining that day. Now, you can very well make out as to what do I mean. Yes. Sir, when the issue CIT bill is action 148A, how can CIT bill consider? When the issue CIT appeal is action 148A, no, 148A action now can be challenged before CIT appeal only when the final assessment order is passed. How can CIT appeal consider objection to initiation when it is approved by a higher rank? Yes, that is there, but then that approval which is given by the higher authority is only for the purpose of, say in case of 148A, that you make inquiry, you give opportunity of hearing, and then later on approval of 148AD order. So that is a challenge, but then probably the underlying jurisprudence seems to be that that approval, I mean, was in the capacity of administrative authority. Here, the Commissioner appeal were adjudicating now will have to act in the judicial capacity, and therefore he can do. But definitely, I mean, that rule of subordination, deciding something, I mean, of the higher authority, that will be there. Yes. Saksham, ये देखना है if all these questions can be saved if it is possible. Whether now, after 1/4/2022, is it mandatory or notice of 147 must be issued by National Affairs Center or still jurisdiction education? Now, I do not know what is your name because you have not given your name, so I cannot call you by that name, but then be that as it may. Now, you're right. On 29th of March 2022, one CBDT notification came by which all these notices were to be issued in a faceless manner. Now, we have raised I mean, this issue before High Court in our writs, which we have filed in Delhi High Court. And in Delhi High Court has issued notice by taking cognizance of this, and the matter is sub judice. But one thing I can say, the department does not appear to have any plausible explanation as to why they are not going this 147 proceeding in faceless manner, despite 151 capital A now having been brought on the statute. If batch are done and return of income not filed initially, and for 148 also, what do in such cases in view of 249(4)? Yes, very good question. So 249(4) clause B says that a person who was required to pay advance tax, and you know the advance tax liability is determined under section 2091. So you will have to compute the advance tax liability in terms of section 209, and then 249(4)B applicability can be seen. 249(4) says about which return? Return under section 139. In your case, so you have neither filed 139 nor you have filed 148. But then, in case you have filed in 148, then tax on that 148 return must be paid. Rakesh Goyalji, order 140 is passed without disposing adjournment application for 2 days only on 9/3/2003. Now, it's not justified, but merely because Rakesh Gupta says unjustified would not become unjustified, appropriate court or competent authority will have to adjudicate and will have to say this. Rajiv Bhai क्या कह रहे हैं? Against order under section 179 and which subsection? No, appeal is not maintainable, Rajiv Bhai. Only writ is to be filed before the High Court. Sir, how to number additional ground? That is again number 1 or next to earlier serial number. No, additional ground number 1, additional ground number 2, additional ground number 3. Manoj Tanwar. Sir, can we take any number of grounds or should we try to limit these to certain numbers, say within 20 grounds? No, it depends upon. There cannot be any blanket formula that the grounds of appeal cannot be more than a particular number. So it depends upon the grounds of the grievances. If your grievances now can be captured in 20 independent grounds, then it can be 20, it can even be more. Sahil Jain sir, in case no return was filed, either 130 or 140 or 140, then every evidence would be additional evidence, and whether the petition to admit be filed with form number. Okay, though form number 35 says that additional evidence should be filed, but additional evidences can be filed even during the appeal proceedings. Achin bhai, after 1/4/2023, appeal against order under section 143(3) passed by NFA's assessment should be filed 246A, because 246 Achin is in respect of appeals which are to be filed before Joint Commissioner of Income Tax Appeal. I mean, their jurisdiction has not been earmarked, so appeal would go in 246A as on date. Sahil Jansar, please could you throw some light on difference between Rule 46A and Section 250, subsection 4 for admission additional evidence? Very good question. Section Rule 46A is an obligation cast on the SSE, first of all, to make out his case as to why it should be covered under any one or those four clauses of Rule 46A. Then it enjoins a duty on the Commissioner Appeal to confront it to the assessing officer and then pass a reasoned speaking order by exercising his discretion. 250 subsection 4 is a power given to CIT to conduct his own inquiry. If you see sub-rule 4 of Rule 46A, now courts have said that any evidence asked by CIT appeal while disposing the appeal on his own motion now will not be treated as additional evidence. So under 250 subsection 4, CIT appeal can ask inquiry to be made with reference to the evidences filed by the SSE may not be additional evidence, or he can direct inquiry with reference to additional evidence, or he can make or he can get any inquiry done deholds the evidences before it. So these powers are quite wide. Rejoinder and remand report, please. Okay. Now, when you file your written submissions, then the CIT appeal sends the copy of that written submissions and paper book to the assessing officer to seek his remand report. Now, that the assessing officer sends his report, that is called the remand report. Now, since you are the appellant, now against that remand report, you have got right to file the rejoinder. So, remand report is to be furnished by the assessing officer, rejoinder is to be filed by you. Sir, can we file appeal CIT against order? No. Manoj bhai, nahi. 148 AD is not appealable for CIT appeal. Assessment made in December 19 without issuing notice under section 143(2), no appeal has been filed. Can application under section 154 be filed? No, 154 would not be available because 154 says that the mistake should not only be a mistake, but then it should be mistake apparent. Apparent has been defined by courts to say that when there is no scope for any debate, doubt, or controversy, only in that situation it can be said to be debatable. Now, though one can say that if a notice under section 143(2) has not been issued, then Supreme Court has said that that assessment is bad and not to follow the Supreme Court order constitutes mistake apparent from record. But I would prefer that appeal should be filed with condonation petition and then you exhaust 154 also. So that would be the ideal situation. Sir, notice 140 was issued before 29(3), but order passed after 29(3). Then order should be passed by, I told you it should be passed by NFAC in the light of notification. Yes, yes. Sir, advance tax 244B has to be as per order under section 147. No, probably I have not been able to convey you. Advance tax has to be with reference to section 209. If you read section 209, subsection 1, it has got A, B, C, D. So computation of advance tax is to be made under section 209. And there are different situations which has been envisaged. Provide detail of the case for notice under section 147 faceless. Somil has left, but one decision which is the sub judice before Delhi High Court is Aadhar Shila. If you go on Google, you will find this Aadhar Shila. Next, please. In case we do not want AO's involvement, can we risk not furnishing additional evidence? and let the CIT will ask for such documents and infer as to not let AO come in the picture. देखो assessing officer even in case of 46A4 have complained before the tribunal that at least the principle of natural justice has not been observed. So even in such a situation when the CIT appeal can ask for the evidence, still on the ground of the non-observance of the principle of natural justice, the tribunal instead of deciding the appeal at its own command has remanded the matter back to the CIT appeal. कितने और हैं मेरा गला now is
Sir, it was the last question we have received.
हैं?
It was the last question that we have received.
Okay, that's all.
Yeah, that's all, sir.
So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. We have decided that we'll keep on organizing the webinars on interest of mass interest, black money law that is on card, real estate joint development agreements on which we have written books relating to 148, 148A, and there are several topics. And I have seen that webinar is the most effective medium instead of going when different branches and different associations call you. It takes a lot of time, though the best part of those interactions are that you personally interact with members. That is a different matter. But then from the time saving and effectiveness point of view, I mean, we, me, Raj, Somil, Saksham, now we undertake that we'll keep on sharing whatever little we have learned in all these years with all of you. Thank you from the core of my heart, from the core of. So now, Saksham, you can present a vote of thanks
Okay, before that,
profusely.
we have received one more question. If you,
हाँ बताओ.
yeah.
In case of high pitch assessment, 100% demanding, yes, 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 it is stayed. Even in high pitched assessments, high pitch committee also stays the demand.
That's all the
Yes,
questions.
yes, yes, please.
As I say, and I think everyone would agree that it was a really interesting, insightful session. I thank you, Raj sir and Dr. Tuta sir and Somil sir for such a insightful session. I also thank you, all of you who joined us today for the today's
Thank
webinar.
you, thank
Thank
you,
you.
thank you.